All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the message this morning. We are continuing in our series, Discipleshift, talking about the idea of discipleship and specifically building a culture of relational discipleship within the body here. And last week, Joel introduced the series and began with the first part of 3 when defining the idea of discipleship. And the first one is identification, or the idea of choosing who you are going to disciple under. He talked about basically the idea that we have to take time to consider and actively choose Jesus for who he is, because that is going to basically be the power of the discipleship. And that is what leads into what we are talking about today, which is imitation. So back when discipleship was a common practice, the idea was relatively simple. A person who had committed their lives to a craft of some sort, whether that be a physical craft, a mental craft, whatever it might be, they would commit their lives to it, and they would be considered a master. Or another word that we might be familiar with, a rabbi, a teacher of this thing. And unlike today, where we have just myriad resources to be able to look things up, all sorts of examples of different people that we can pull from, draw from as we're trying to learn skills, to develop a craft, whatever it might be. They didn't have that. Instead, they just had these masters. And so the idea was simply that if you wanted to be a really good blacksmith, then your goal would be to disciple under the master blacksmith, because he was the source. He was the one that you were going to look at. He is the one in the vicinity that knows this craft the best. And only in the biggest of cities would you have multiples of the same craft where you would have different choices. Smaller cities would just have one blacksmith. They might have some minor people that could do some simple blacksmithing, but there was one guy who was just really good at this. And that was the idea of the disciple, is that they would then find this person and they would disciple under them, imitating what they were doing. But one thing to note with this discipleship is that when a person became a disciple, I'm going to stick with blacksmith, of this blacksmith, they didn't mimic the craft only. They became a disciple of the blacksmith, not of blacksmithing. So what would happen is they would actually go most of the time and they would live with the blacksmith and their family. And day in and day out, they would copy what their day looked like. You go and eat breakfast here, I go and eat breakfast here. You start working on the metal here, I start working on the metal here. You go and you talk to this person for this aspect of your job, I go and I travel with you and I see every little thing that you do in your day, and I do the best that I can to mimic it. It's almost like a little child that is mimicking their parent. They just go around and do the same things that they're doing because they live and they see what the parent is doing, and they copy it because that's the best resource that they have to be able to copy. And this is then where we get the gauge of a good disciple. A good disciple was not whether or not you are good at the craft. Now, of course, that is a good gauge for skill, but what people actually looked at is you are a good disciple if you fully represented the person. And that's why when you read through different texts, they will say, I am a disciple of this person. I am representing this person. And the better that I am as a disciple means the more I look like this person. And it became something special. And I think that before I jump into how we can transition this, what we actually need to do as a disciple in this imitation, it is important for us to understand that this was an incredible honor. That the idea of a disciple was an honorable position. We kind of think of like apprenticeships, or we think of like basically learning a job, and we almost think of it menially. Like it's just a stepping stone to get to my next thing because I don't really care about this step in today's age. Back then, being a disciple was a huge honor. It was very important because this is how you were going to become good at what you were doing. This was the resource that you had, and not everybody could become a disciple. The people could only have so many disciples at one time because it was so intensive. So there were like limited slots. And when you got a discipleship, it was a big deal. And who you got a discipleship under was a really big deal. Discipleships under the rabbis of law and the temples, very, very prestigious positions. They were few in number, and they basically instantly gained you just respect and authority and honor within the culture of people. And we see this because even somebody like Paul in the New Testament references who he discipled under. He says in Acts 22:3, he says, I am a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel. Now, Gamaliel was one of the greatest Jewish philosophers at the time, and Paul is basically saying this as a boast. He's not boasting in a prideful manner, but in a sense of like he's showing his stats. These are my stats. I studied under this guy. And the people he's talking to know who this person is. Gamaliel was a big, big name in the Jewish culture and even beyond the Jewish culture because he's one of the most famous educators of this time period. So, again, all of that to just put into our heads that being a disciple is not a chore. Being a disciple is not a downgrade from freedom. Being a disciple is an incredible opportunity to become something greater because you have a personal relationship with the Master. That is what being a disciple means, at least what it meant then and what it now means to us, that we have identified Christ as the best master that we can serve under, somebody that we think is worthy of imitating, and now it is our goal to mimic as best as possible who he was in his life. And with that said, the question is, how? How do I imitate Christ? How do you imitate Christ? And I think that the answer is really simple in terminology. I've broken it down into two categories. Basically, what Christ believed and what Christ did. And each one of those, we also have to ask the question, why? So, what he believed and why he believed it, and then what he did and why he did it. And we're just going to take the passage of Matthew 5. It's our text today, Matthew 5, 14 through 16. Really short verse, but I want to take a moment to show what it means in practicality to actually try to take this on, to look at what Christ believed and why he believed it, and what he did and why he did it. So, Matthew 5, 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So what did Jesus believe? And frankly, you could take like 7 or 8 things from this little tiny passage. So I just picked one. We see here that he believed that the people that he was speaking to were the light of the world. Just a straight statement that he made from the passage. And then I'm going to take it a little further, because I think contextually we can see that he believes that he himself is a light unto the world. We see that in John 8, verse 12. He specifically says that I am a light unto the world. So Jesus believes that he is the light of the world and that the people that he is speaking to are a light of the world. We don't necessarily know exactly what that means. We don't know all of the details of it. That's not the point. The point is simply that we are trying to take one belief of Jesus, because he's the master right now, so we're giving him our trust. We see that he makes this statement, and so I'm going to trust it's a good statement because I trust Jesus. And so now, as a student, I understand that he believes this, and I want to take on this belief, but I need to deepen my understanding if I actually want it to sink in. If I just take a statement by itself and just make that my belief, it's pretty shallow. It's not going to hold a lot of weight in my day-to-day activities. It's not going to help me do a lot with the statement. It's just going to be a mantra that I have. So that's why we have the question, why? Why did Jesus believe that he was a light to the world and that the people that he was speaking to were a light to the world? This is going to help us really deepen this understanding of this belief so that we can capture it and make it our own. And there are multiple reasons for this. That I'm not even going to present all of the reasons why Jesus may have believed this statement. But again, it's an example to show that we can do this, that we can take a passage, see what Jesus believed, and now begin to break it down. So maybe one of the first reasons why Jesus believed this is God's previous example. Throughout the Old Testament, of which Jesus is very familiar with throughout many of these different stories, God, over and over and over again, chose to use people to do his work instead of himself. Not that God ever did anything on his own, of course he did, but we see more often than not, God preferred to empower a person or a group of people to accomplish his will as opposed to just stepping in and doing something on his own. And with that, it would follow that he would continue in the same way in the New Testament here, as Jesus is now presenting these new ideas, that God would continue to use people like Jesus himself and like his audience. And another reason why Jesus may have believed this is that Jesus understands really what light is. He understands that light is really any proclamation of truth because it is revealing the reality around him. And so Jesus understands in this statement that he's making that he's not saying that you are the source of light in the sense that people are creating their own reality, that people, obviously not. Jesus understands something much simpler, that when I as a person go out and proclaim God's word, when I as a person go out and make statements of truth based on the truths that have been revealed by God, I am revealing something to the world. I am enlightening the world, which is naturally in darkness because we don't always see the truth. And so Jesus isn't necessarily making a spectacular claim. He's just saying that, hey, God is going to use you guys to proclaim his truth. So his understanding of this really helps him. And He also has scriptures to have turned to for this, like Psalm 119, 105 says, "Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." So any of the truths from the Old Testament that people were sharing is a light to the world. Or later on, 1 John 1:5 says, "This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all." So even just proclamations that share God, that point to God, is revealing light unto the world. And then one more, just to cover our bases, even as a general understanding that any good that is found within us is a reflection of God. And we see this in James 1, verse 17. "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." So when we do good, when we are representing what is good from God, we are automatically pointing back to him and sharing light. So what all of this is doing is not just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo facts that are useless to us in our day-to-day. What these points are attempting to do is they are attempting to explain to us, the disciple, the viewer of Jesus, why does Jesus say and believe what he is saying here? What about what he is saying is believable so that I as a person can take this on and now believe it? Because the goal is not just to understand that Jesus believed that he was light and that his audience members were light. The goal is that I need to understand that I am light, that I am taking on and imitating Jesus. And to do that, I have to understand why he believes these things. And that's what those reasons are for. And now we can take those reasons and we can take that belief that I have transitioned from Jesus to myself, trying to mimic him. And now I can copy not just the belief, but the actions that follow the belief. So what did Jesus do about the belief that he had, that he was light and that others were light to the world? First thing that Jesus did is he acted in the open. Jesus didn't hide his beliefs. He didn't try to do the things that he did in secret to make sure that nobody saw what he was doing. He acted openly. I think I didn't go and look through to make sure, but I believe that every single one of his miracles was witnessed by somebody other than just the person that the miracles worked on. That may not be true, but at the very least, most of them are. Is that he has witnesses for the things that he's doing. He taught in synagogues. He preached openly on the streets. He taught to crowds of hundreds and thousands of people. Jesus was not secretive about this. He understood that he was a light to people, and therefore he took action and put himself in the midst of people so that when he took actions, he was being a light directing those people to God so that they could see the goodness and the truths of God. The other thing that he did is that when Jesus performed the miracles or when he taught or did the things that he did, he actively attempted to reference the source of these things, to reference that these are from God, not just something that he's doing. And we see this in John 5:19. So Jesus explained, "I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does." So as he's doing these things, he's pointing back, constantly saying, you thought that this work was good, you thought that this was impressive, this miracle was amazing, look to God. You thought that my truths were revolutionary, look to God. He's not trying to puff himself up to make himself look good. Everything that he's doing is driven back towards the belief that he has, that he is a light for God, that his actions illuminate the world so that they can see God. And so now what I can do as a disciple of Christ is I can take a passage like Matthew 5, and I can say that Jesus believed that he was a light of the world, and he even believed that the people he was talking to were a light of the world. And I can take that and not only have a mantra that I can live by of I am the light of the world, or a light of the world, I should say, sorry, but I also can have a deep-rooted belief and understanding of why he believed it, and have effective methods for carrying that out in my life. Because if I only have a belief in my head, in my heart, if that's where it stops, it's worthless. Doesn't mean anything. It has to take form in my life. That's what we talk about when we talk about the fruit of a person. It's the product of your life. It's the product of who you are on the inside, overwhelming to the outside in the form of action, in the form of proclamation. So now I have this pathway directly from the Master in Jesus, this line, so to speak, that I can follow of this is the best path that I can follow, and I have steps to get there. I have actions that I can take. I have beliefs that I am grounded by. Because I now am defended by false beliefs. I now am defended even from doubts that I have in myself, because I have been able to grasp what Jesus is, who Jesus is, and I have grasped what he believes to the point where now these actions matter to me. They are based on what I believe, what I have filled my life with in working to imitate Jesus. And so with these things, this is really the point, because if I, like I said, if I take these and I make a statement that I believe that I am a light to the world, or I take a statement and I say that I believe in Jesus, or that I believe anything else that he has said, and I don't take action on it, it doesn't represent itself in a visible way in my life, then the truth really is that I didn't ever believe. Not in the way that Jesus talks about believing. And what has happened is one of either two things. I have either misunderstood Jesus and now am warring between my misunderstanding of him and my own perception of life, because Jesus is never wrong. We know this. We have selected him as the master because he's never wrong and because I believe in imitating him. Or, and I think that this is probably the more likely of the two, I have a heart alignment issue. And I need to recommit myself to what it means to be a disciple. Because if I can study the Bible, if I can look at Jesus and I can call him a great person, if I can take into myself all of these different things that he believed and make these statements proclaiming to anybody in the world, hey, I believe in Jesus and I believe the things that he taught, but I don't live and look like Jesus, then like I said right at the beginning, I have not really succeeded in being his disciple. Because the gauge of being a disciple was that you look like the master. That when you act in such a way, in such a manner, that you represent that which you are copying, and it is recognizable to those around you. So, the very easy and yet difficult question is, do you look like Jesus? Of course, not in his deity, not in his godliness, but in his life, in the truths of his beliefs, and in the effectiveness of his actions? Does your life look as though you are following Jesus? Does it show the fruit of somebody who has fully committed in their heart to imitating the pattern that Jesus has set before us? Because if it doesn't, then that is a time that we can reflect back and we can look and we can say that I have missed something and I need to recommit to this idea. I need to reevaluate that first step that I took. Reevaluate the part that says, I need to choose Jesus because I believe that he is the greatest that ever was. Because I believe that he is the best example for my life. And when we have that firmly set into our hearts, we can, with a surety, copy and mimic the life of Jesus, knowing success is at hand. Because he is the perfect template. I have to believe that. I have to take that in and act upon it, or else I will not reap the benefits of Jesus. I will not be what he has called and set me forth to be because I'm not really a disciple. And so today, the truth is simply this. When I go through these steps and ask what Jesus believed, why he believed it, and what he did and why he did it, it always comes back to the beginning. That if my selection in Jesus is true and firm, then I have a reason to believe in Jesus. And because I have a reason to believe in Jesus, I then have a reason to do what he did. And my reasoning for doing what he did is because I believe in Jesus. It always comes back to the beginning. And so today, I would just ask that as we set forth in this continuing series of relational discipleship, that we ask ourselves two things. That we ask ourselves, do I look like a disciple of Jesus? If the answer is yes, amazing, please continue going. Please continue to share that love with the people around you to inspire and to encourage. But if the answer is no, then ask the second question. Do I really believe that Jesus is the greatest? Do I really believe in what he said and what he did? Because if I do, then the second part should also be true. And today, that is what discipleship is a belief in the Master so much so that my life looks like theirs. And today, I ask that we take the amazing opportunity granted to us by Jesus to become disciples. To take this limited slot, so to speak, to be in relationship with the greatest master of all time and to receive the rewards therein.